Amidst massive budget cuts, some of America's public schools are still managing to find the money for some outrageous enterprises. Now, Minnesota's Lakeville School District just laid off 94 teachers when its budget was cut by $7 million. But according to the St. Paul Star-Tribune, the same school district spent your tax dollars to send a delegation of teachers at the cost of $160 per teacher to a white privilege conference. It begins in Minneapolis today. Now, according to the conference website, the white privilege conference is, quote, a conference built on the premise that the U.S. was started by white people for white people. And according to the conference's founder and director, he wants everybody who attends the conference to learn that, quote, white supremacy, white privilege, racism, and other forms of oppression are designed for your destruction, designed to kill you. So what I want this conference to help people of color to understand is how that system works, how it can create little bitty things that add up, that cause hypertension, that cause you to maybe eat unhealthy or not exercise. Well, that's instructive. Joining me now with reaction to this outrageous use of your tax dollars, the national spokesman for the Council on Racial Equality, Niger Innes, and Bucknell University professor James Peterson. Niger, you know, our kids in many cities and school districts can't read, can't write, can't do math. The level of education is not up to par, especially when we put it on the world standard stage. Is this, when you're laying off all of these teachers, is this an appropriate use of funds?
Absolutely not. It's absurd. It's disgusting. It's outrageous. And it's a miseducation of our children. You know, Sean, blacks and Latinos around the country lag behind in graduation rates of not only whites, but of Asian Americans, people of color, another people of color, Asian Americans. We lag behind. In Minnesota, the African American graduation rate is one of the worst in the state, or in the State of the Union, is Minnesota. And they can't think of anything better than to miseducate and to create a phenomenon of victimization and what I call a neo-segregation of forcing blacks and Latinos to think of themselves as the other, that this country is not theirs, that they don't have the ability and the right to strive to kick, fight, and scream and struggle like every other American does. This promotes victimization. It's a miseducation of our children. It's a gross injustice.
Mr. Peterson, they just laid off 94 teachers. They had to cut the budget by $7 million. I believe that every child has great talent. The word education is from the Latin to bring forth from within, and we're spending money on a conference. Do you think this is an appropriate use of tax dollars?
Well, this is the use of the tax dollars are actually to raise awareness for the teachers about white privilege. And although I respect Niger, I just don't agree with him here. If you look at things like gender privilege or class privilege, maybe it's easier to see. But the bottom line is when we look at public education, criminal justice system, health care, we can clearly see that there is such a thing as white privilege. And listen, this is not indicting any individual white person. This is just to say that if you're black, you have to have different concerns with the criminal justice system. Let me finish my point.
But wait, you're not answering my question. So why don't we address my point? My point is they just laid off 94 teachers. We have hang on. We have a limited budget. We have kids oftentimes leaving school districts not able to read, write, do math. And that's right. So they lay off the teachers and then they pay for all these other teachers to go to this conference. You think that's an appropriate and wise use of limited money?
Listen, there are various ways of yes, I do, because white privilege does exist, and we need our teachers to understand that. Listen, the vast majority of white folk across this country do not have the same kind of concerns in our public educational system as students of color. They are not tracked in the same ways, they are not discriminated against in the same ways, and the curriculum doesn't represent them or misrepresent them in the same ways. The fact is, you can be a white student sometimes and not to have the same kind of concerns that students of color have. It's as simple as that.
Well, I would recommend that if this conference really want to do a service, they should call it white and yellow privilege, because Asian American kids are outperforming not only the average, but the average white kid too. So obviously this privilege exists for whites and Asian American kids. You can go to any school district in this country and the poorest school districts, and you will see the valedictorians are sometimes first generation or second generation kids from from Asia, from India, from China, from other parts of Asia.
Good point, but a separate issue.
Because they have a culture that promotes education. Right. They don't have people trying to feed them nonsense.
Like separate issue, though. Listen. They also are not discriminated against in the same way that black and brown people are discriminated against. They also are not discriminated against in the same ways that black and brown people are discriminated against.
People of color too. They're not Europeans.
They are, but their history in this country is quite different, Niger. Their history in this country is quite different.
Let me tell you,
their history in this country is quite different.
Their
history in this country is quite different.
They do not play with the Asian American community.
Hang on, let me bring this point up. How is it that if somebody faces discrimination, how is it that as this piece says, it causes them hypertension, causes them to eat in a way that's unhealthy, causes people not to exercise? Isn't that predicated on an idea that individuals are not responsible for their own behavior in some way?
I am all for individual responsibility, but if you look at the arc of history of the relationship between health care and public health and African Americans, you can see that there are various cases in which African American folk have been alienated from health care. And that's just not the economic piece of it, that's a cultural and social piece of it.
But
so we have to repair that.
We have to repair exercise.
We have to repair that first before we can say there's a level playing field from which we can engage here.
There's not a thing that this phony, fraudulent, racist conference is promoting that would deal with those disparities.
This is not racism.
One of the things, by the way, Sean, that is a disgrace is that the University of Colorado is participating with this sham of a conference and providing continuing education units. Colorado Springs, University of Colorado, they need to be investigated.
Listen,
I call on Eric Holder and the Justice Department to investigate this scandalous spending of tax dollars.
We need to spend that money to hire those teachers back, which will help the students that we claim to care for here, and that's what I want to see for them. Guys, thanks for being with us.
As long as they're aware of things like
Let your heart be troubled. Our great American panel. Next. And before we get to our great American panel, let us reveal the results of our text voting poll. We asked you what you expect from the president's so-called deficit reduction plan that he will unveil tomorrow. 10% of you said you actually expect serious spending cuts from the president. 35% said you expect him to grow government even bigger. And 55% said more of the same. I say that it's going to be raise taxes and sound like Reagan and do nothing. On our Great American panel tonight, we have Democratic pollster, Fox News contributor Doug Schoen. He is an editor at thedailycaller.com. Fox News contributor Tucker Carlson is here. He's a former wrestler, NCAA champion, 1976 Olympic medalist, the author of Lehman Brothers, Dance with Delusion, Wrestling Wall Street. Stan Disick is here. Did I say it right? Yep. Yeah. All right, just checking. All right, let's first of all, what do you think of the poll? What do you expect tomorrow?
Well, I don't expect anything of substance, so I don't think he's going to get to the heart of the issue.
Yeah, I think he's going to sound like Reagan, and I think he's going to talk about raising taxes, and he's going to be the only president since Walter Mondale that's saying, I'm going to raise your taxes, and that's going to help him lose the next election.
Given what his budget looked like, the budget he just submitted, like the other day.
Yeah, 2 months ago.
Yeah, the other day, it seems to me. It's pretty amazing that he's standing up there now saying we need to tackle entitlements with a straight face. I mean, because
he's got to do it, otherwise he's not going to be reelected. He's seen the poll numbers. He saw what happened in the Congress. Bottom line, there's no argument, no constituency for his first budget, so he's got to come up with another budget to try to at least rhetorically rival Paul Ryan.
Here he's going to say we need to raise taxes. You know, remember Walter Mondale. The truth is my opponent's going to raise your taxes, and he won't admit it. I'm telling you I'm going to raise your taxes. A lot of good that did him as he lost 49 states.
You've got 3 Republicans, Sean, in the Gang of 6, who also acknowledge you've got to raise taxes. The problem is he's reversing himself on taxing the upper-income Americans, which he had, as you know, in December.
On to.
Yeah. So that's the real problem.
Wait, could we just let reality in just for a sec, though? He's going to get up there and say the richest among us, the most blessed, need to pay their share. Most Americans, this is true, receive more from government at this stage than they pay in. The top 2% pay over 50% of all federal income taxes. The rich, like them or not, pay way more by any measure than their fair share. They pay for everything.
The bottom 50% of wage earners pay only 2.9% of the federal tax bill. So it's
Correct.
not like they're paying. All right, so here, let's take a little trip down memory lane. This is 2006. This is then Senator Barack Obama. We now have this battle. The next battle in the budget is going to be over the debt ceiling in about a month. And here's what the president said at the time when he was a senator. He said the fact that we are here today to debate raising America's debt limit is a sign of leadership failure. It is a sign that the U.S. government can't pay its own bills. It's a sign that we now depend on ongoing financial assistance from foreign countries to finance our government's reckless fiscal policies. And he goes on to say America deserves better. I actually agree with him. He was right then. He's not right now.
I think the issue is one where both sides would do well to leave the debt ceiling off the table. I think
Not raise it?
Well, no, raise it. And not put that part of the debate. Debate should be in the budget. If the budget is taken care of, the debt ceiling takes care of itself.
But you know, the White House is going to argue, Doug, that they've got to raise the debt limit. Otherwise, the full faith and credit of the federal government. What credibility does he have, considering what he said as senator?
Well, his credibility is pretty limited now because of his fiscal policies as president. But Stan's right. We've spent the money in the issue on the debt ceiling. The real question is, can we get a hold of the deficit? Can we develop a meaningful plan to rein in entitlements and get our deficit under control?
If I was in Congress, I would not vote to raise the debt ceiling.
Right.
I'd vote for a balanced budget amendment.
I would, with a plan to balance the budget, absolutely.
I think it's dangerous to go down that path.
Why?
Well, you have to remember that the
Wouldn't
global
it force them to cut?
If that was the end result, but you may force a risk premium for uncertainty on the bonds.
But
that would be far more
IMF,
costly.
isn't China, isn't Europe lecturing us now on capitalism and how if we don't get control of our debt, wouldn't they see that as a sign that America may actually get it?
Or that American government is so dysfunctional that it's not a place you'd want to invest. Here's what I'm confused by. As a tactical strategic matter, why did the leadership in Congress apparently not want the confrontation this last week over the government shutdown, but welcome a confrontation over the debt ceiling? I mean, it seems like that would be backwards.
Seems to me, how does
confrontation was last week?
How does Obama allow a debt ceiling to occur if the Republicans say we're only going to raise it if you do A, B, C, and D and mean it and stand by it? I mean,
because he wants the pressure from the Republicans so that he can get to the center. He knows with the independents moving away from him that what the Republicans are doing is ultimately playing into his hands.
All right, well, we got to take a break. I don't mean to cut you off. Quick break, more with our Great American Panel. Straight ahead. And we continue now with our Great American Panel. All right, Donald Trump keeps making news, showing up very well in the polls. One Newsmax poll had him up by an online poll for 500,000 people. On Newsmax.com. Did well in the New Hampshire poll where he came in second to Mitt Romney. He's taken on some controversial issues, but then he also said he might run as an independent if he doesn't get the nomination. That would pretty much assure Barack Obama's reelection.
Absolutely. Given the way Trump's positioned himself now, if he runs as an independent, he'll get a lot of votes because there's a lot of antipathy to the Republican and Democratic parties. But his support tilts to the right, and that would assure Obama's reelection.
Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because I've never seen someone try and win Republican votes by saying in the very first week of his campaign, but if you reject me, I'll destroy you. And that's basically what he's saying. I mean, I can't imagine he's winning a lot of affection.
I'm going to his office on Thursday, so I'll obviously ask him about it. I can't imagine he means. I agree with you. I think that would be a bad message to send to the people that you want to get elected in the primary.
The message he's trying to send, as he argues from the far right, isn't consistent with then running as an independent if he really wants to accomplish.
All right, but there's a reason why I think Donald Trump is doing well in these polls. And I think the reason is he's taking on issues boldly where nobody else would dare touch him, raising questions about Obama, fighting him, saying he would do better, taking on China, saying America looks bad around the world. And people like the fight.
I think people like the fight. They also don't like the field of candidates the Republicans are now putting forward. Basically, the Republican...
We don't know that yet. I think that's too early to tell because the race hasn't really begun.
Mitt Romney's run before. Mike Huckabee's run before. They're good guys, but they're not exactly setting the world on fire. Let's be honest. And, Sean, you're exactly right. Trump is taking on issues and taking on the president. Bottom line, that's what the Republican base wants. He's the only one giving them the red meat.
And I think as it unfolds, if Donald Trump is not the one that emerges, then I think he'll realize that his role is more as a facilitator, not as a spoiler.
He's got the fever. I don't know. I thought this was clearly a marketing opportunity. It's Donald. I mean, could we just be real for a second? It's Donald Trump, right? He's not going to be president. He's doing this to sell himself. However, I look at his eyes.
I'm not so sure.
I'm not either. That's the thing. Now I look at him and I see a man who's looked at the polls and decided, you know what, actually, why not me? Like, I could be president. I think he believes his own stuff at this point.
Sean, I've advised people for 40 years. I've never seen a front runner for president who doesn't take himself seriously.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he's serious. Who else could emerge? I mean, I disagree with you in as much as I think people really need to see these debates. They need to hear from these candidates. And I think at that point, they'll compare and they'll contrast. I think Americans are going to want a bold, serious adult elected to the White House. Well, so I think any of them could emerge on the stage when they're debating other candidates.
The Republicans have a Barack Obama for this cycle. He's not going to run.
Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio from Florida. He has American
so Marco Rubio's on the ticket. He's
got to be. He's got to be the VP.
I agree with that. I think
there's no choice.
I think Marco will be president one day.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's super impressive, but if we've learned anything, it's, you know, there's no reason to hurry anything. Let's learn all we can about every candidate.
Who's going to get in? We don't even know who's getting in or out at this point.
So,
Tim Pawlenty's in. He's been in. Mitt Romney's in. Newt Gingrich is in.
Haley Barbour's in.
Haley Barbour's in. We don't know about Huckabee. We don't know about Governor Palin yet.
So, but Mitt Romney seems to be the steadiest among them.
Rick Santorum, could he come out of nowhere and do well?
Could.
Mitch Daniels? Could any of the governors we talk about? I mean, you want Christie, right?
I think Chris Christie is the guy for the moment in that he clearly has the huevos to stand up against the public sector employee unions. But look, the candidate always looks much more presidential when he's alone. You pick the guy, and the dynamic changes completely. He's no longer one of 8. He's the guy.
The Republicans need somebody who has a message of optimism, of growth, and a willingness to confront our declining position in the world.
And that is the best person?
You know?
He's not Rubio. He's not.
How about David Petraeus?
Interesting.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Busy at the moment.
He's a little busy at the moment, yeah.
I think he could find the time.
That's all the time we have left. Thanks, guys. Greta's next. We will see you tomorrow night. Thanks for being with us.